Okay, so we continue on Ayin Daled Amud Aleph, the very first line, as we've been saying over the last weeks and a month or more. Right now, we've departed from the traditional sugyas of Ribbis that we've been learning for these many months, and we have different, isolated, sometimes not connected, but there seems to be some thread that goes through them, different halachas or stories that the Gemara is telling us, ribis related, but sometimes very tangentially, but nevertheless, there is some hemshech, there's some continuation. So now here again, we'll get through several different thoughts that the Gemara wants to share. So on the very top of Ayin Daled Amud Aleph, Amar Rava, the Gemara gives us a very interesting scenario. Amar Rava, Hani Beit Klosa Diyor Zizul Echad. And again, a lot of these, they lead to halachas. A lot of these instances lead to halachas, which today we can see the sort of the strains of the halacha, even though we have so many different trajectories or different elements of life today that may seem not to be connected, but there is a connection. There's an underlying connection in the halacha, and we're going to see that in these unfolding stories. Three people gave money to one person to hold, so he should be the person who would safeguard the money. Right? Not an unusual circumstance. So they lamadin lahu midei, so that person should be an agent. They're leaving money with him to be an agent to buy things for them. It could be he's a business agent, regardless. I mean, we can counter many different things of what agency is, but they give him money to be an agent. Now, here's what happens. So they tell him, you know what? Go buy there's an auction, go buy for us, whatever the case may be. And he goes and he buys for only one of the three. So they each give him $100, and he goes out and he spends $100, but he buys it for only one. So the other two are sort of left standing. They gave him money as well to buy, and he didn't buy for them, let's say in that auction. Says the Gemara, Zovim Lechulu, then it's as if he bought for all three of them, and all three are shutfin in what he bought. So if he bought something that has value and somebody wanted to invest in it, because let's say it was an heirloom piece or whatever, and the other two, he comes to him and says, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Reuben, I bought it for you. But Shimon and Levi. Says the Gemara, no, Zavan Lakulu, he bought it for all three. There's no such thing that he can buy it for one if all three of them gave him money. However, below Amran, we only say this, Ella de Lotzar Vachosim Inish Lukudei, that each person did not give him a separate, we'll see what it means separate sort of pile of money, then he buys for all three. Aval tsar v'chosim inish l'kudei. But let's say each person gave him an envelope, and in that envelope was, in other words, he received three envelopes as opposed to, let's say, receiving $100 in cash from three people, which he put into one pile. Now he has $300. Now, if he has three envelopes of 100, then Lamanda Zavin, then for whomever he bought. In other words, if he said, I took the envelope from Shimon and I bought the item from Shimon's money, then it belongs to Shimon. Lamanda Zavin. But for the ones he didn't buy, he didn't buy. So what is it telling us? The Gemara is telling us that it matters on how one does a business transaction. What does that mean? In other words, if a person is a sort of a cashier for a lot of people, and a lot of people deposit money with him. So he commingles the money. He doesn't know which is Reuben's money or Shimon or Levi or anybody. In which case, if he's a shliach, then he's a shliach for everybody because he's not miyuchad to any one person. However, if people, and again, maybe in business, this is something to think about because when a person delivers money to a person, for instance, today we have what? Stock accounts. Everybody has an account. It's not one account that he buys for a dozen people. Everybody has their own business account. So if I take money out, I'm the shliach, and I take money out from Reuben's account, I'm not taking it from Shimon. I'm not buying for Shimon if I'm buying stock for Reuben. So you see how this plays out. La halacha is that it all depends on how the transaction is done. If it's done in a sort of joint effort, he doesn't segregate, and no one expects him to segregate because they've rolled the money together, and then he dips into that pot and buys something, then no one can say you bought it for me. How do you know it's my money? The same green is the same green for everybody. So that's the chilek that the Gemara makes. It's an interesting thing with regard to shlichus agency, that you have to be specific and on how you go about doing this business.
All right, so let's throw out one other thing. I can't imagine we're not going to get to it at some point anyway, but I'll throw it out there. This you just talked about is the question of whether the money is separate chunks versus literally thrown together. The
Right.
flip side is I could see two very different situations. One is there's a sale on apples. Everybody puts their money into the pot, and the guy's then supposed to buy 3 bushels of apples and then give each person a bushel of apples. The other one is there's a sale on TV, and everybody puts their money in their pot, and he's supposed to buy three TVs and then deliver each one. So if he buys only 1 bushel of apples, then it might be that in the end, okay, so now they all have a piece of that bushel. So they'll each get a third of the bushel in the end, and then they'll each get 2/3 of their money back. But if it's a TV, then you have a problem of how do you divide and how do you deal with it?
But Rabbi, it's even more. I mean, I agree with Menashe, but it's even more. There's a presumption here that everyone wants some of the same thing, and that it's pooled together. If it's pooled together or it's separate, and it may be just that he's an agent for 3 different people on 3 different items, and he says, well, this particular Shimon only wants this, and I'm going to buy it for him. But at the auction, the things that they wanted weren't there or weren't a good price. So how can we make this presumption without knowing additional facts?
Right. So to take, Michael, your situation first, if a person goes out and if he is told by Reuben, Shimon, or Levi, this is what I want, then, and the others don't opine and say that's what we want, it's very simple. I mean, he's going out to buy for one and buying for other. The presumption here is that let's say they gave him instruction, buy us something of value, an heirloom that we can then sort of invest in and hold on to it for the future. They didn't say apples, TV, or something with specificity. So now he goes out, and as a shaliach, as an agent for the three, he finds something. Oh, this is perfect because this is something I'll buy. I know we'll invest in it, and a year from now, it's going to be worth a lot of money. So he didn't buy, like Menashe, you said, for one person. He bought for all three, but he bought something that all three can invest in. You're right. If it's a TV and it's for usage, then we have a problem because if he bought one, then the question is how you value it so that each one has a chelik in it, and that's obviously more complicated. But we're talking about a different circumstance. Again, in the simplest sense, 3 people tell him, go and buy us something in the marketplace that we can that has value to us and that we can hold on to and invest in. That's the particular case I think that makes the most sense for this scenario, And in that particular situation, if it is commingled funds, then no one can make a claim to that individual item because he said, go buy it for me, but there's no identification that the money that he used was Reuven's money or Shimon's money.
Rabbi, I mean, they didn't do this together. They didn't give him $100 together at the same time.
Correct.
So it could be that at this auction, he bought this one heirloom for one of the people, but he said, I don't see three things or two things even that make sense. I'll go to the next auction and I'll spend, if I can find two other things in your example about a generic heirloom, then it didn't say that it had to be at this moment in the first auction that you see. Those weren't the directions. It was a matter of finding something from. So the presumption is that they're all looking for the same thing and he's buying it, all at once. And there may not have been enough to go around. So he's saying, well, I'll wait. So why is this presumption that that they are partners in it when they didn't come together to be partners?
Right. They didn't come together to be partners, but because, and again, this is the chiddush, this is what the Gemara is trying to tell us, that unless there is exclusivity and you can identify the exclusivity, either because they spoke out and said, this is what I want, or this is what I want, or this is what I want, or specificity because the money that was given to them in special packets, not as a fund. Once you have a fund, which means everybody puts in money to the shaliach to hold on, but he does not identify specifically which money came from whom, then by definition, he becomes a shaliach for all three of them at one time. And the chiddush is that if he has in mind, I'm buying this for Reuven, that's not sufficient. In other words, it's not.
But that's not fair because they didn't say we're doing this together, buy something for us. Again, it's a matter of he can pick what he wants based on the person. Maybe he knows their individual tendencies. So to say that everybody else is a part of it because he put the money together, that was him doing so. He got them separate, even if it's cash, even if it's the same form of cash. They gave him all quarters, and he put them together. It's his responsibility to have an accounting of that. It's not pooled unless they all came together at the same time with the same amount of money and said, buy us something. So how can we make this presumption?
So what the Gemara is telling us is that under these circumstances, this is the only result. I mean, look, you can question and say how, why. The Gemara is saying that when people aren't specific and don't say, hold on to my money so that my money can buy something, then they don't have an expectation of exclusivity, which means that if he can buy, let's say they all tell him not to buy a specific item, but to buy like an item of value. Buy an item of value for me that you see there. I give you the discretion, and that's what I want to hold on to because that'll be of value to me. Each one said basically the same thing, and he's now an agent for them. Now, think about it in terms of today. Let's just say today, if in our time, they were each one they told him that they want to buy Apple stock. Three people said, here's money, I want you to go ahead and buy Apple stock. And let's just say, and I don't know that this is a reality, but at first he goes out and and he said, buy me 100 shares of Apple stock. And he goes out and he goes out and they have this money together, not in separate accounts. And he buys Apple stock, and he said, all I could buy today was 100 shares of Apple stock. I couldn't buy any more of that. It just wasn't available. So what? Everyone's going to claim you bought it for me. So that's not the halacha. The halacha is that if he did not have, regardless of what he thought, if the money was not, if he didn't take the money from Reuven's account to buy the Apple stock, then both Shimon and Levi have a same taina to that Apple stock as Reuven, because whose money did you use? Do you know you used Reuven's money? Of course you don't know.
But Rabbi, here, let's give a more concrete example. Each of them give him $100 to buy 10 bushels of apples at separate times. The only thing that's available is 10 bushels of apples. So this chiddush is that they've got to split them up.
Correct.
But the chiddush could easily be, well, he has 10 today, 10 bushels today. I'm going to give it to Shimon. And then Reuven and Binyamin, I'll get you the next time. And when there are 10 bushels, why is the presumption? Because they came to them at different times, regardless of whether he commingled the money. Why is it that it has to be that first purchase at that time?
The answer to that is that, very simply, I bought you 10 bushels today. How do I know I'm going to get 10 bushels tomorrow or the next day? So it's a davar shelo bola olam. It hasn't happened. And he says, I don't want 10 bushels and wait a week until the next harvest. I want it today. I have a reason for wanting to buy the 10 bushels today.
There's all this presumption in the deal.
Yeah, exactly. No. We have to make presumptions. I agree. We have to make presumptions.
You could be, if you want to protect yourself, you can put it in writing. And, like we've talked about before.
Right.
So you specify, this is what I want and this is when I want it. And then if you're still in the same situation where there are 3 people want 10 bushels, there are only 10 total for sale, and you split them,
right.
The person could be fine with that or not be fine with that, because they have no use for 3 1/3 bushels. They may want 10 bushels. So, I mean, this is...
Michael, I don't disagree with you. If you want to make presumptions, then you can always get around a lot of these situations. But we have to... The Gemara is positing a set of facts which clearly indicates that the purchase was a one purchase and not the first of several purchases. I mean, the Gemara is just simply saying he goes out and buys it in the market, and each one says, timing of the essence. So let's say I need it now, and he says, here it is. I had in mind Reuven, but I don't know if I used Reuven's money. The chiddush is not in the fact that he can... Yes, you can always for and say, tomorrow's another day, I'll get it for you. Or fine, you want to make those presumptions. The Gemara is not saying you can't make those presumptions. We have the reason why the Gemara is saying it this way is not because everyone's going to have the opportunity. Only one will have the opportunity for whatever reason. There's a scarcity. There isn't going to be another harvest for another month. I mean, all these reasons, if you want to speculate, you can always find a way to say, yeah, let's get around it. Today is you, tomorrow is Shimon, the next day is Levi. Fine, no problem. The problem arises when there isn't a tomorrow. There's only a today. So if there's only a today and all I have is 10 bushels, then can I say that because the shaliach had kavana to give it to Reuven, that Reuven gets it to the exclusive of Shimon and Levi? Says the Gemara, no. You're not going to impute a kavana into the shaliach that he had in mind to buy for Reuven when the money was commingled, and he can't say he used Reuven's money. I guess that's the real point. I'm the shaliach, and I clearly wanted to buy it for Reuven. There's no question about it. But then the question is, did you use Reuven's money? And he says, I don't know. I mean, I dipped into the pot and I took out $100. I don't know whose $100 it was. Says the Gemara, under those circumstances, your cheshbon, your kavana doesn't matter. It belongs to all of them. When the money is commingled. So that's the point of this Gemara.
This whole story, Rabbi, is that because there's missing words.
Yes.
There's missing words
or missing
from
action.
The beginning.
Missing words or missing actions, correct.
And so that drives the notion that these transactions have to be made much more clearly than just loose words and leave ambiguities.
That's
The words
100%
create the ambiguities, and there's no answer to the ambiguities.
right. But I think the chiddush here
The
is,
Gemara says, since there's so many ambiguities here,
yeah,
split it,
split
all
it.
three.
Right.
So
But if the shaliach comes and says, but it isn't ambiguous. I had intention to buy it for Reuven. Says the Gemara, your intention doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter because you didn't separate the money, and therefore that's what the ikr is, not your kavana. So Michael, in your scenario, sure he can say, I bought it from Reuven because I know tomorrow there'll be another delivery, I'll get it for Shimon. But again, if they all are masking, there's no problem. I'll wait till tomorrow, no big deal. You're 100% right. But the facts don't dictate that that's what really is happening here. What's happening here is he went for a shalichus, and either they all needed it today, or in the case where I said before, the one heirloom and there was only one to be had. And he said, I have in mind to give this heirloom to Reuven. So the Gemara says you can't do that because you didn't. The facts won't allow you to go ahead and make that decision under these sets of circumstances. However, if we took the money, let's say they all gave him money, and each one had an envelope, and he used Reuven's envelope, and Shimon has a taina. Why did you use Reuven's envelope? You should have used my envelope. That's a different story already, because he used Reuven's envelope. Now he has to answer, why did I use Reuven's? But that's a whole different set of circumstances, because he used Reuven's envelope. That's the envelope he bought it with.
all right, so let me throw out two other pieces here.
Yeah.
One is, I mean, as an example, you could say, oh, well, maybe you'll be able to get other stuff tomorrow, but two examples come to mind which is they send them to the market. There's three people there. They're all running around Erev Pesach for matzah or Erev Sukkot for Arba Minim. So this guy comes by and says, I'm going to the market anyway. And so the three of them hand him their money, and they each expect to come back with either box of matzah or a set of Arba Minim.
Right.
And the guy gets there, and there's only one box of matzah, only one Arba Minim left. What do you do?
Right.
So that's one, and waiting till the next day isn't going to do any good.
Isn't going to help.
Right. Second thing is, I could see, and I think, and Michael, I apologize if I got this wrong. It sounds like we morphed from the question of three envelopes or everybody throwing money in a pile into a possibility of three people handing money in at different times, and then the guy commingles them. Because in that situation, I could argue, Reuven gives them the money at 10 and Shimon at 11 and Levi at noon. And then the guy takes all the money, goes to the market, and there's only enough for one. You could argue that, I could argue, I don't know if you would, that this should go to Reuven because he was first, even though the money at this point is all thrown together.
Yeah. And that's, yeah, I mean, that's it. There is a halacha, according to some Mefarshim, not everybody agrees, that that even if the money came together, not in your scenario of different times or even simultaneous, and he goes ahead and speaks out and says, I have all this money here. I don't know which is Reuven's, Shimon's, or Levi's. It's all been commingled. So I'm in a bind. But the Shaliach, am going out to buy this lulav and esrog for Shimon. In other words, he then, because he's in a pickle, and he's got this money in a pot and doesn't know whose money is what, he is going to single out and say, you know what? I am now retracting my shalichus from Reuven and Levi, and I'm becoming only the shaliach for Shimon. So according to some Mefarshim, that can actually be acceptable, even if the money is not segregated by each individual one, but is in a pot, because the shaliach now realizes he made a mistake. He should have segregated them, but he put them all into one drawer. But but the fact that he is renouncing, that's the point. He's renouncing his shlichus from the other two. So it's as if he says, here's your money back, here's your money back. It may not be the same literal $100 bill or bills, but I'm giving you back your money. So in other words, figuratively, that's what's going on. Not everybody agrees with that, but there seems to be in the Meforshim that might be something that the Shaliach can do if he said, I messed up and I really want to buy it for Shimon. Now,
There's no words for that.
what's that?
Sorry.
Rabbi,
This stuff, all these other exclusions are not mentioned in the Gemara.
No,
So
no.
you can't assume,
Well, that's what,
that's way out assumption
right.
that the Shaliach took over and he decided what's going to be.
No,
I mean,
no, you're 100% right.
he's not a Shaliach. Then if he starts making changes.
Why not everybody agrees with that. Not everybody agrees
I
with
don't
it.
agree with it.
Yeah,
there are two angles here, Rabbi. So there are three guys. They're paying $100 for what they want. One gives them $100 bill. The next guy gives them 250s, and the next guy gives them 520s. He puts them in a pile together. He still knows which is which.
That's the second scenario. That's the separate envelope scenario because he knows whose money is what. The whole question is what money am I using? If I know I'm using, Michael, your money because you gave me $100 bill, then there's no question that I bought it for you.
So let me ask a question. In that scenario where he's pulled the money together, but he can separate because they're different denominations, can he, in this last chiddush, can he say, call the other two up and say, I'm withdrawing, there's only enough for one and I don't have enough for you. I'm going to buy it for Ruvain in this example, because as Menashe said, they were not simultaneous, they were sequential. So that's the money being pulled together sounds ridiculous because the money is fungible as we know it today. If they were given, you were given different forms of currency,
that's already separate envelopes. That's already separate envelopes.
Well, but the point is, even if he put them together, he has an obligation to know what he took from each person. Correct. That's part of his agency. Correct. That's part of being a shaliach. So he can't cop to, well, I didn't know whose it was, so I just bought it. He has that obligation to say 100, 100, 100. And in this last chiddush, he can say, well, I like Ruvain better than Shimon and Levi, so I'm going to do it for Ruvain, and I'll call the others and say, sorry, there's not enough, I don't have your slichos. And that's permissible, right? So this is all about commingling money together, and that just doesn't make any sense to me, because as a shaliach, he has to know, regardless of what the currency looks like, who gave what. He needs to jot down, I got this from this from that, this from that. And commingling money should not be the basis for this decision. It's either because the halacha is that I couldn't get 30, in my example, 30 barrels of apples. So the only thing I could get was 10. So I'm going to apportion it because you all wanted this and you wanted it at this time. So I have to apportion it because there wasn't enough for all of you. But remember that Ruvain and Shimon may not know that Levi is a partner because he doesn't know how many that he has. So it's again a presumption.
They don't necessarily each know of each other. So that's not the point. But let me just say, Menashe, to your point, the chiddush also here is it doesn't matter who gave what when. In other words, the first doesn't have kedima because he gave the money first. And so therefore the first purchase is his because he's the first one who put the money in. That's not what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying that there's no such thing as kedima because I put the money in first. But Michael, to your point, the only reason why some Meforshim make that point that if he announces, and he has to announce it, it's not in his brain. He has to announce it and say, you know what? I am going and what I'm going to buy is going to buy for Shimon or Shimon only. So in fact, he is renouncing the shlichus, and therefore our scenario kind of changes because the fact that he makes it clear, and again, this is Jay's point earlier, is you got to be particular. You got to write it down. You got to make a point of it. So if he didn't write it down, it was all Baal Peh, but he clarified the Baal Peh. He clarified what he said by saying, no, I'm going for Shimon. Then he immediately announces that the purchase she's making for Shimon, Reuven and Levi can't tie it, but I also gave you money and I also expected a shlichus because he clarified it. If he didn't clarify it, then we're back to square one. Everybody has a tiner to that same item, whether it's apples or anything else. And now, you know what? At the end of the day, the agent made a mistake. He should have been more makbid. You're right. He should have known who he was taking money from, and he himself should have made designations. This is Reuven's money, Shimon's money. But Michael, when you say if one guy gave him 100, one guy gave him 250s, one gave him 520s, etc., then that's separate envelopes. Now he can say,
but it's not.
I dipped in, I
It's
took the
happenstance
250s.
That's how it came in.
Yeah, but it's also a different situation. If different people gave different denominations, you're not, if you don't know how much a person gave you, what's the difference what denomination he gave it to you in? And besides, who takes money from somebody and they don't know what they're given? It's your
Again, we're assuming the shliach wasn't so hefker that he didn't know how much he was getting from whom. He knew he was getting $100 from a number of people, and his shlichus was to go buy. And again, now it depends on what. I mean, maybe it doesn't depend. To go out and buy the apple season, I have to go out and buy apples for everybody. It turns out that when he gets to the thing, he's last in line and he gets only one bushel. Everybody has bought all the apples. Now he's stuck and said, all these people wanted me to buy apples for them. I have all this money and I can only buy one. I'll buy it for Reuven. That's not good enough. If he says he's buying it for Reuven, it's not good enough. But if he goes out and he says specifically, he says, you know what? I am making the shlichus for Reuven to the exclusion of everybody else, even though they gave him money already, and he has their money in his drawer. He can basically renounce or clarify his shlichus and say, my shlichus is only for Reuven. I'm buying this for Reuven, and therefore, and that's true even if the money's commingled and he doesn't know whose money he's using, is because he's renouncing shlichus from the other. So the chiddush here is that you, again, this is only a minority of a minority view. It's not a majority view. It's a minority view that he can renounce and he can say that this money was only from Reuven. The majority view is you took money from everybody and commingled it. You're now stuck. Either you buy for everybody individually, or you buy for everybody collectively. So the Gemara is telling us you can't then pick and choose and say, "Oh, I had in mind Reuven, even though I know that Shimon and Levi gave me, they all gave me money and it's in the drawer, but I meant Reuven." So it is a little complicated here because to the majority view, it doesn't matter what you say later. If only unless the monies are specifically identified, can you say I bought it for Reuven because Reuven gave me $100 bill. That's one thing. But when it comes to the commingling of money, then the shaliach, are stuck. And if you can only buy enough for one or even two, then all three have to participate. And all the other theories and possibilities, Michael, tomorrow I'll buy for you, next I'll buy for you. Yeah, that's all fine and good. But it's today.
But Rabbi,
today, everybody today says, I want it today. And like Menashe said, it's matzah and Erev Pesach. How are you going to split it?
Well, but the Meforshim, Rabbi, they're focusing on whether the money is distinguishable. not that the monies might be equal, that they're distinguishable or not distinguishable. So if it's separate envelopes, it's okay for him to say Ruvain, and I'm not doing it for the others. But I assume that means that he has to renounce his shlichus before he makes the purchase. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. So the problem is that he can be an agent for 100 people. At the time that Reuven and Shimon went into it early, and as you said, the Menashe, that his idea of order of entry is not part of the halacha. It just seems like the fact that you can't tell whose money, but even if you know that everyone gave the same amount of money, is a loophole to get out of the responsibility of shlichus. So I just don't. So the general rule is, if you take money under the same set of circumstances from multiple people, and there's not enough to go around, or there's only one item, like in the case of an heirloom, that they are partners, as many people as you've taken money for, they have that percentage interest in it, and there's no other alternative, because he can't distinguish whose money it is.
That's the majority view, and that's the halacha.
And that just seems like not the essence of what.
Look, the agent dropped the ball, Michael. The agent dropped the ball. He made a mistake, and his mistake can't flow back to the others who all in with good intention said, "Here's money, buy it for me." And so what the Gemara is saying is, it's incumbent on the shaliach to be meticulous and to say, okay, I know who I'm representing. I'm representing more than one person, but the money that I'm using is only from one person. If he
But that's
goes
why
out
he earns his fee. That's how he gets a fee to be a shaliach. He's not doing this out of the goodness of his heart.
right.
If it's a true shaliach, I mean, you
But
could be a
he made a
shaliach.
big mistake by not identifying, segregating, and doing all the
But
things
then
that
I don't understand how you can say, well, these envelopes were different, so I don't remember whose money's what. They gave me the same amount of money, and I happened to take them on the envelopes and put them together. And so, but it's different if the envelopes remain separately. Seems like, form over substance.
So, Rabbi, if all three paid the shaliach, there's a small percent. He's now a paid employee. He's a shliach. Does that make a difference in this whole story? Does he have the option to make decisions? In other words, the three says, okay, I'm giving you $5 each one to be the shliach, because it costs money to go to the next town and go to the market and so on.
Right.
Does that change the status of the shliach's decisions, or does he still make the mistakes?
The whole problem is, you can't identify who he is really. You're right. They all made him a shliach, but who is he the shliach for at the time he bought the only single item that each one wanted? That is the real problem, is that at that moment in time when he said, okay, I'm here, there's only one, I can only buy one, I'm going to pick Ruvain. Gemara tells us you can't do that.
But if he's
That's the
paid,
the finish is you can't make the decision yourself.
Why can't he make
whether
the
he's a paid
decision?
shliach or not, Jay.
Why can't he make the decision, because he was paid $5 from each person to go do the right stuff?
But he can't make the decision unless he knows that he is specifically. This is what the chiddush is that once funds are commingled and he wants to be the one to say, I'm using Reuben's money, then Shimon can say, but wait a minute, you used my money to buy for him. Prove it otherwise. Prove you didn't use my $100 that I gave you, that I wanted you to buy for me, and you bought it for Reuben.
Again, it's
That's why the
missing
Gemara is
words.
saying it's important to have identification. Each one has to, and whether you have it because each one gave a different denomination, in other words, the amount of the bill, or because he put them into individual safes or individual boxes or whatever he did, That's what the Gemara is telling us is the chiddush here of shlichus, is that that's what you have to do. If you're not makbid on doing that, then basically you have sort of kind of wiped out your individual shlichus, and now you're a shlichus for a rabbin, and everyone in the rabbin can have a chelik in the shlichus. That's the chiddush of the Gemara. I mean, as much as we want to find ways to say, oh no, he can do this, he can do that. Bottom line is that that's what the chiddush of the Gemara is that agency is such that if you're a shaliach for more than one person, you better be very specific in how that shlichus is going as to whether or not you're announced. According to what some of you announced, but according to most of announcing doesn't help. So you basically have to say, here's proof that I'm buying Reuven's matzah. Here's the money. It's the $100 in Reuven's envelope. That's what I pulled out of my pocket. I didn't pull out Shimon's or Levi's. I pulled out only Reuven's. So again, it's murky. But at the same point, the obligation now falls not on the people giving him the money, but the shliach himself to be makbid. And here the Gemara is telling us in shlichus, this is how you're makbid. If it's commingled, you got a problem. If it's separate, then you know exactly who and what you're dealing with. And again, all the permutations and combinations of I'll buy for you today, you tomorrow, yes, that all helps if everybody's masking. I'm masking, I'll wait a day. Okay, then no problem. Tomorrow there'll be another delivery and I'll get it tomorrow. But we're talking about, we're talking about items that may not be divisible and may not be sort of in multiples. Then you have a serious question. Who did he buy that item for? Says the Gemara. In this scenario, he bought it as a shlichus for everybody. And in this, where you identify, then you bought it as a shlichus just for that individual. I mean, that's really how ultimately, with all the different things we discussed, which really can be germane, but aren't necessarily what the Gemara is wanting to tell us that you don't have those options, Michael, to buy today, tomorrow, and the next day. If you did, no problem. But if you don't, and it's a one and done, and like you say, Menashe gave the best example, matzah and Erev Pesach. Who's going to get the matzah? If I had Reuven's envelope, then it's Reuven's matzah. But if I don't have Reuven's envelope, I can't say I bought it for Reuven, according to most of the portion. So again, it's a lively issue, but and again, now we see how this plays out in terms of now or tomorrow or the next year. This halacha will always have sort of an imprimatur on how people do business. So you better do business the right way. Otherwise, people will have a tiny to you. What do you mean? You bought it for my money, and there's no way you can prove he did or didn't.
It's a difficult situation. To say something here.
Yeah, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Suppose they all give him $100 bill each.
Yes.
And they give it all at the same time.
Right.
And he buys nothing. The next day, Shimon comes and says, "You bought nothing. I want my $100 back." Can he say, "Well, I don't know where your $100 is"? He has $300. Give him one of them. So
That's it. Exactly. But when he didn't segregate, again, Michael's example was segregation by denominations, 100, 250, whatever. But you're right. If each one gave him the same denomination and he didn't put it in separate envelopes, then we're back to scenario one where three people gave him and he didn't buy. Now he gives each one $100 back. At that point,
no, not each one. The other two don't say anything.
Oh, the others don't say anything. So
just Shimon. Shimon wants his $100 back. He can't say, "Well, I don't know which of these $100 bills."
No. But assuming that each bill has the same value, meaning one isn't a treasury note and one isn't Federal Reserve, and one is worth 2 cents more, that he can pull one of the hundreds out and say, "I didn't know what I got, and here's back whatever, and it won't make a difference because he'll get $100. He's not going to be mocked, but this doesn't look like my 100. Well, again, if my 100 had writing on it, I want my 100 back. Fine, I'll give you the writing, the money back with the writing, because that's a simon. That's already a simon. But as long as the money is generic and can't be traced to any individual, and it's not identified specifically, the Gemara is telling us that it's all one, and it's money in, it's money out, and the shaliach basically is stuck. He can't now make a decision. Oh, I bought it for Ruvain. Doesn't work. So he has to then say, sorry, fellas, you're going to have to split this all up. And again, that we're going to sue each other that it's mine, it's mine. But again, this would be the halacha. If you came to Bezdin, and so Rav is saying this is what would happen: is that no one would have a taina for the entire box of matzah. Everybody would have to share. Now, if there's again, we're talking about different items, but if it's an item that they bought and everybody wants a chelik in the item and they can't decide, there's always the recourse, which that you go ahead and sell the item. You sell the item, you get the money, you give everybody the money back. But that's not the point. They want the item, so it becomes complicated. Again, depending on what you buy, it becomes very, very complicated.
Moral of the story: don't go out and get somebody their stuff. Let them get it themselves.
Well, it's even more than that, David. That's true, but it's even more than that. We have an adage in our society that buyer beware. Throughout the halachas and the Gemara, it's seller beware, because it's always that the favor is to the purchaser and not to the seller. It's not even. It's not going back to ribis. Everything is in favor of the buyer. So it's reverse from how we live our society today.
No, but we live our society today. Look at government protections, and that's the equivalent in a
There
sense
is no
of a law.
such thing. There's
where
no
there
such
are
thing.
such protections, it's in favor of the buyer. So somebody comes to your door and wants to sell you something, and then you have 3 days to get out of it. That's on the buyer, not on the seller. That they have those kinds of things.
Well,
Also,
that's why I'm saying that may be true, but it's not true at when you exchange. So, for certain goods like cars, for example, you have a lemon law and you have other things. But we always say buyer beware, because you may have to sue to get your money back, because the laws are such. In the Gemara, the halachas of buying and selling, that in the Gemara are, the buyer is always protected. He's always protected against something happening, the price going up. We talked about ribis and the price going up. The protection is there. The seller is never protected as far as.
Well, actually, in some cases, sellers also protect. But I would argue that even if we say that yes, categorically the buyer is the one that's protected, you still have the same issue. They still end up having to go to a Beis Din to fight it out.
Well, but the thing is, it's as David said, why go to an agent? I mean, you're in trouble if you're going to an agent, because there are things beyond your control that you don't know about. For example, you don't know how, if he's an agent and he's buying for you, don't know how many there are. So you have to make sure that you put in writing exactly what you're going to get. You have to protect yourself, because otherwise, as a seller, you're going to get screwed.
Well, and I would argue that 99% of the Gemara, or these types of Gemaras, the Babas, it's all about what happens if you don't have everything spelled out, because everything is spelled out. None of this.
Well,
You're right.
David made the best point. He said, "Go buy it yourself.
Right.
Don't go to an agent." But let me just throw in one thing which we're going to learn about a little bit later, and which we all know about. To your point, Michael, when you said who do we protect? There is a Manda Omer, and it's a significant Manda Omer, who says Kol da Alim Gavar, meaning that if the money is deposited with one person, that person, whether it's the seller or the buyer, has an advantage, because he's the one who's now the presumptive owner or in control, because the Alam Gavar, he's got it. And that's a significant in commerce. That's also a very significant issue, is because when we can't ultimately determine, then the person who's holding it is the person who's holding it. In other words, if the money was already transacted and you want to protect the buyer, but somehow there is something in the circumstance that isn't clear that the buyer can get the money back, then that position is sorry, you don't have the money. You're not the balabos. The person who has the money is the balabos. So
but nowadays we have escrow agreements, we have conditions if we're putting deposits down, which they did not have during the days ago.
No,
there's a flip side to all this, which is we also have 10-page license agreements on software that nobody ever actually reads. So it goes both ways.
Well, but you can read it.
Yeah.
It's within your power to read it.
Yeah. But anyway, we see that it's in the simplest form that the Gemara is telling us, al pi seichel, how do you go about? And therefore, it's cut into it's in its simplistic form that the agent, the shaliach, is the one who now has the discretion, as it were, because all these people gave him money. So you better be very careful. The agency is not something to be taken lightly. You have to be very, very careful, and you have to know who you're buying it for, so that this circumstance does not come up. Anyway, it's a very interesting and significant halacha, because it really does have ramifications throughout halacha, even today, when we today again it's more sophisticated. We have more safeguards in place. But think about it: if you went to your broker and you gave him money and said, "I want you to buy the stock at such and such a price," and 5 people did it, and once he buys for one, the stock price goes up. They're each going to say, "You bought stock for me," and the answer is going to be, "Well, I don't know, because I'm not sure who I bought it for." So again, these halachas have repercussions, and it's a question of being makbid and being specific. In any event, it's a fascinating discussion. Let's just go on a little bit further and see if we can another different little sugya that the Gemara is talking to us about. The discussion here, which a little bit different in terms of agency. Omar Rav Papa Mishmei de Rava. So Rav Papa said in the name of Rava. So now we know la halacha that in order to acquire, you have to do a kinyan. So again, it doesn't necessarily exist in other secular laws, but we have to have a kinyan. There has to be, especially with metaltalin, you have to have meshicha, hagbah. You have to either be able to pull it, push it, lift it, whatever. What happens, says Rav Papa Mishmei Ravava, that if let's say you have a signet, a signet ring, or some kind of a what do you call those? A marker.
Seal.
What's that?
A seal.
A seal. That's it. You have a seal that identifies it as belonging to you. So Rav Papa says in the name of Rava that a seal is now essentially the same as hagbah. In order for me to buy it, I don't have to lift it, I don't have to push it, I don't have to do anything. I can seal it. And if I make a seal, that shows it's mine. Again, this is being progressive now, because we're now going from the rudimentary form of acquisition, which was always by metaltalin this, and now we're introducing a new form of acquisition. So, Frank the Gemara Lamai Hilchasa, what's the practical effect? In other words, you're telling me that this is the sealing is a form of acquisition. Lamaisa, give me what's the Lamaisa? So Rav Chaviva Oma the Mikanya Mamish, that he says. So Rav Chaviva says, when he says that sitma is called sitma, meaning the seal, or situma, that it's kana, it means mamish kana. It means mamish. No distinction from the other forms of acquisition. It's mamish the same. Rabbanan amrei lekabel alei mishapora. The Rabbanan say no. The halacha of kinyan doesn't change. It's Mashiach, it's Hagbah, it's Masira. Masira means pulling. Like for instance, when you can't push a bull, you pull a bull, right? You push a goat, but you pull a bull. So these are the halachas of kinyan, and it doesn't change. You can't all of a sudden introduce, oh, I'm going to do a seal, and all of a sudden it's going to be the same. But it has effect on the mishapara. Now we all know what a mishapara is. Mishapara is where you can't hold someone's feet to the fire specifically and say that you are now obligated to do this, right? Because there's some ambiguity. So we're going to say, no, it doesn't pass. You shouldn't do it. In other words, you and I, Michael, made an agreement. We didn't do a classic kinyan. I shouldn't renege on what I just did with you. There should be a bond between us that should allow us to make the deal. Teretz is, no, there isn't. You didn't do Hagbah. You didn't do Mashiach. So what do you get? This is the concept of Mishapara. And Mishapara, as the Mishnah told us in the very beginning, is a pretty serious thing that a person doesn't want to be sort of called out as having done something improper, because we're all tzaddikim, we're all righteous Jews, and we don't want to do something that puts us in a compromise. So you see that when he said in the name of Rava that a situma is a form of kinyan, not so simple. It's a machlokes.
But Rabbi, I can understand this because if you have to perform hagba'ah, you, the person who are acquiring, have to exert something to do that. Somebody could take your seal and seal it, and stamp the seal to the item that's not you. So it's not necessarily that you have done something to signify that. So the idea is that you have to show yourself, because otherwise you'd argue that, I didn't do that. Somebody else put the seal on there for me. So it's not as clear as if you have to actually perform.
Also, Mashiach, these are very public acts. People can see, oh, he lifted it up. He made a Kabbalah's kinyan like we do, let's say, for Mechiras Chametz. Right? I stood there. I lifted up the handkerchief. I made a kinyan. Chosam Kala. When they have a Tanoim, they make a kinyan. Okay, fine. Now we see it's a public display. On the other hand, Michael, if a person has his seal is a ring. It's a signet ring. People had rings that were their logo or their crest or whatever it happened to be.
Yep.
So I mean, is it as public as the Torah tells us, Hagbah Mashiach?
Not necessarily, right.
Not necessarily, right. So therefore you have this machlokes as to whether it's really an effect or it's a mishapara effect, which is as close to the thing, but not the thing, so to speak. Says the Gemara, interestingly enough, the Hilchasa, what is the halacha? The Kabbalah mishapara, that no, you can't take a seal and exchange it for a Mashiach. You can't do it. The halacha, the Torah tells us Mashiach or Hagbah or Masira. That's what you have to do. But so it's really Mishapara. But listen to this: Uba Asra the Nehuga the Mikne Mamish. But in a place where the signet is unequivocally accepted as the same as a traditional act of Masira or thing, Kone, then it is Kana. So in other words, what he's telling us is that we have this expression that minikidin. What does that mean, minikidin? It means that there is a halacha. But if people in a place do something enough times that everybody knows that that is the way to go, then that minig isn't just it's a custom, I can break the custom. It becomes a din, and that's infused in our halacha is that minig din. And I'll give you a perfect example. I mean, I know this from firsthand. Is that in some in the diamond center world, a handshake is is the same as Mashiach. They didn't do Mashiach because it became so ingrained that when you make a handshake, that is the same as Hagbah Masira. Now you can no longer back out. So in that particular case, it's not even a Mishapara. It's if you went to Bezdin, Bezdin would say, yes, you have a kinyan. You made a kinyan, even though it's not the traditional kinyan. So this again, the Gemara is giving us a little bit of an insight here that sometimes halacha is halacha. There's no question. But when a community or a society, whatever it is, has a custom that becomes so universally accepted, then remember the whole point of all this. We're going to go back to it again and again and again. Is to facilitate commerce. That's what the Gemara told us many, many moons ago. That we don't want to make it so onerous on people that they will not engage in commerce. Commerce is an important thing that the Torah thought it was important for people to engage. So it's not just so pashut. Oh, everybody lives his own life. No, we integrate. We deal with each other, and we have to deal with each other so that there's a set of rules. So halacha is halacha.
So maybe a similar thing might be to the handshake thing, as opposed to Mashiach, might be that we have all kinds of rules regarding shtaros that to extend them to say, okay, instead of a pen on paper, to extend to electronic, the DocuSign and all this other stuff that has certainly entered into American law.
That becomes the seal. That becomes the sitma. That becomes the way to do it. So you're right. So it may only work in one society, but not in another. A handshake may not work between two people who are selling farm goods, because that's not an accepted practice that a handshake is necessarily the thing. But very interestingly, in the common law, in the secular law, there is in virtually, I mean, predominant states that a deal has to be in writing. If it's not in writing, an oral deal doesn't work. Where I'm now located in Florida, it's 100% acceptable, al pi halacha, meaning by the law, that an oral contract between two people, if it's witnessed without any writing, is a contract. That won't work in New York, or that won't work, let's say, in another state. So you see that the rules of the locale will be very, very important in making that determination. So just like custom becomes law because that's the law in the society that you're living in, so too. So in other words, it becomes a little ambiguous, because if a person comes from the Diamond Center where he's used to handshakes and he starts doing other business and he finds out, oh, I have a handshake, and the guy says nothing doing. What do you mean? I had a handshake. I bought all this stuff from you. Teretz is that it doesn't apply. So again, it makes it a little bit ambiguous, because, but that's what the Gemara says here. Asra, in a place, the nehugu the mikde mamish, where what you're doing, the sitma, let's say, is mamish, because that was the machlokes. Is it mamish or not mamish? So he's saying then it's mamish because that's the way everybody did the work, and therefore you can't go back there. So all right. So the next piece here really goes into a much longer discussion, because now we finished sort of the vignettes that we've been learning over the last few weeks, and now until the end of this cycle, till we get the next Mishnah, the Gemara is now going back to the Mishnah itself, which we learned on Ayin Bay's Amud Bays, and is taking apart each of those examples. Remember, we had an example where someone stores wine, or someone stores olives, or someone stores fertilizer. So each of those cases is going to be sort of taken apart and discussed. So we're about to get into the next one, and it goes on a little bit long. So I don't know if we should start it, because it's just we're gonna stop in the middle and I have to review again. So maybe we should just stop and pick that up next week. But at least for now, going forward, we're now going to go back to the essence of the Mishnah and try to understand what the Mishnah means when it says that you can store in a barrel, and that is considered a transaction. What does that mean? What do these all mean? Mar's going to break it down. So I think Mitzvah Shem next week we'll start with that, and hopefully we'll be able to go through a number of them. But today's discussion was really, really very on point, because it shows, with all the different discussion, that it doesn't seem to be so simple. That the Gemara says one thing, and you say, oh, I mean, that's the halacha. But in our own minds, we try to pull it apart, because there seems to be a fairness issue, is what I'm hearing from what we're discussing. That is it fair? Is it fair to do this? Basically, the onus is on the shaliach, and if the shaliach fouls up, then Michael, you might ask, why should I suffer because he made a mistake? But in order for it not to be chaotic, in order for it to be, there's some system here. So we have to rely on the fact that the shaliach will be an honest shaliach, a fair shaliach, and no, in this case, he didn't intentionally mean to foul up, but he fouled up because he didn't do what he was supposed to do in terms of segregating. But the halacha is, that's what the point is that we have to be makbid. We have to be very particular. And if we're not particular, then we can't be prejudiced against one person for another, because of the fact I did nothing wrong. I gave him $100. I wanted him to buy me the matzah. But the fact of the matter is that since it takes two to make the deal, and like David said, don't get a shliach, go to the store and buy your own matzah. Don't ask the shliach, buy your matzah. So we have to be mindful of that. And every time we do that and we rely on somebody else, people are fallible. People make mistakes. And the Gemara is telling us, here's how the mistakes blow back on each individual. So anyway, that's the halacha. But you see, there is a small minority of Mefarshim who do make a distinction and say that there's a way for the shaliach to kind of maybe last minute try to salvage the situation by he's renouncing the other people and saying, I'm an exclusive for this person. And according to them, under the right circumstance, you can do that. The large majority says you can't. Once you've taken everybody's money and gone to the market, you're now a shlichus for everybody. You can't come back and say, oh, I now renounce Reuben and Levi and buying for Shimon. That's unfair, say the Paiskim, and therefore you can't do it. So anyway, very wonderful, lively discussion. At Mitzvah Shem next week, we'll start picking up on the next subject.